I just want to say what a pleasure it is to have you all here. We really appreciate everybody's involvement in this and this commitment to this process downtown. This has been a long effort, and it means a lot to me that you'd all be here and to help put this together. I want to put some perspective on what we've been working on as we put this together. Design workshop, if you could raise your hands real quick. These guys have put almost 4,000 hours into some of these plans. We have almost 3,500 city staff hours as we've gone through this planning process. And to you all, have put almost 1,000 hours into working through this. So this is a community engagement process. We've wanted to make this transparent. This is your community. You have ownership in this, and it's really important that everybody buys off on this and feels like they have been able to be a part and a participant in what's happening here. We're really grateful for the efforts that have gone into this. I've seen a number of city council members that are here tonight that have been involved in this and have been supportive of this. And I look around the room and see so many community leaders that have put so much time, energy, and resources into what's happening in Ogden right now. And it's a great time to be here and to be a part of what's going to happen in our next 10, 20, and 30 years. So your participation here is critically important to us. That's what we tried to build from the get-go here, and we really appreciate everybody being here. Your passion and energy really matters. I was at a meeting earlier with Kim Bouchard at the back of the room, and we were talking about the Olympics coming in potentially 10 years, and one of the themes that came out of that was the sense of community that sets us apart from everybody else. Ogden City last year was rated as the #1 most charitable community in the United States when it comes to volunteer hours given and charitable donations. So give yourselves a round of applause. We are here to listen and to implement what you guys want to see and to do, and so we thank you all for being here. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to the professionals. And again, know that how much we appreciate your time, energy, and investment in our community. So thank you all for being here, and let's let it go. So Brandon will be up next. Thank you.
Got to drop this mic a little bit. That's so tall. I just want to say thanks to the mayor. Another round of applause for him, please. I've had the privilege of working for the city for about 13 years and with Mayor Caldwell for 8 of those years, and I can tell you that it's been fantastic. He's created a culture and an environment and an organization that allows dumb guys like me to think really big and to utilize all the tools that we can muster together to try to make some significant change in the community. And none of that would be possible if we didn't have a mayor that allows us to do our job and paves the way for us to do it. So thank you. It's been a pleasure. So I just wanted to take a minute and really root us into the context of the why. Why are we all here? Why have we given these guys a ton of money? And why have we spent and why we spent a year trying to solve problems? And it really is reflected in the statement that you're reading on the screen. We have a lot of challenges and a lot of opportunity ahead of us. And so we're asking the questions, how do we create a vibrant, dynamic downtown? How do we plan for the growth that is ahead of us? And how do we do all of that in a way that doesn't abandon the things that we hold true and dear? All of the heritage that we hold, all of the history, and most importantly, all of the people. I think that's our most unique value proposition. So we're looking ahead, but we're also making sure that we stay rooted to who we are and what has gotten us this far. And we need to do that in a way that's economically sustainable for the city government to be able to continue to provide services over time so that the citizens of the community can benefit from that. So this isn't just a planning exercise of buildings on a map and colored pictures. It's really rooted in economics of how do we build the greatest value for the citizens in the community, and then how do we create a community where everyone is welcome and there are things happening and working that contributes to that vitality and that sense of place. So I'm going to turn it over to Rob. He's going to tell us the answers to all of that. And hopefully after this, we'll be able to mingle in the lobby again, answer questions. Anybody that has a shirt like this probably will be able to answer a question for you. If not, just look for the people with the cool hair. And there'll be more food, so if you haven't eaten dinner, there'll be more food after this. And the bathrooms are just down the hall if you need to use the restroom. So, oh yeah, one last thing. Just a little bit of kind of brief preview into how the city is constructed. So right now, the development cycles and the downtown development in general is guided by our general plan. So it's a big, thick document. It was adopted in 2000, and it's really the document that we live by that helps us to look at land use, transportation, economic development, housing, all of those things. And from that, the city's broken up into 18 community plans, and each community plan represents a neighborhood, and those are individual plans for individual neighborhoods. The Central Business District has its own little plan, and it's about 10 years old in terms of some of the revisions that we've seen there. So that's kind of the nexus of what we're talking about. We're looking just at the downtown, and we're looking at how do we make changes to our downtown community plan to create a framework that allows for that future growth and prosperity that we're all looking for. Does that help?
It does.
Okay, wonderful. Thank you.
Wonderful. All right, I'm going to adjust this because I've got a number of slides here to cover. My name is Rob Berg. I am an urban designer and planner with Design Workshop. We're a 50-year-old company. We have 8 offices throughout the U.S. We're about 150 people or so. And we specialize in creating plans of this nature. Now, I would say that this effort is unlike any other one that we've created, which is really exciting. Generally, we're hired by the planning department or office of planning. This was a different approach. When we first sat down with the mayor and Office of Economic Development, talking about that dilemma, which was up on the screen before, and thinking about how can we create a plan that provides economic sustainability and resilience, but also takes into account what makes a complete community. So making sure that we're talking about walkability and housing options and job density and all of these other kinds of things that we're going to dive into a little bit here. It was a different approach for us, so we're very excited by this. When we started this process, and in fact, I'd love to see a raise of hands of anybody that sits on the stakeholder group that meets on a regular basis for this. So raise your hands. You can see a number of folks in the room. This group, again, has put in those thousands of hours to help guide where we are today. And it's only with this group that we are actually where we are today. And so initially, when we met with this group, we established these 6 project tenets. And these tenets are things that we're constantly going back to as we start to draw the plan now. And we're testing the plans based on these tenets. So are we providing adequate land use? Is it appropriate, and is it cohesive with the future resilience of the downtown? Are we protecting what really makes Ogden fantastic? And a lot of that goes into the historical assets that are already here. And so are we protecting those in a positive way? Are we increasing mobility? There's a lot of wonderful projects that have already occurred. Grant Street is a great example of it, where Ogden's on the leading edge of mobility improvements in the country. And so how do we further that and continue that momentum forward? Open space. We all love open space. A lot of the reason you all live in this area is because of the natural beauty of the place. And so how do we ensure that open space is part of this downtown core, and it remains part of the identity of downtown Ogden? Equity. Equity is a really hot button issue these days. Making sure that we're providing an equitable place for all, so an equitable opportunity for all. And finally, the wonderful branding that a number of us are wearing. Mike and Jennifer did a wonderful job putting this stuff together on a really short timeline, but we want to brand this move, and so that when we start to move forward with implementation projects, it reflects this idea of a maker culture, a culture that is really the historical backbone of the city of Ogden. So it all starts with the city of Ogden in that teal square at the top. it's a little blurry, but there are a number of different groups that we've been meeting with. And again, you saw the hands from the stakeholder group. That group includes Public Works, it includes Planning Department and Parks, and everybody at the city representation. You see the piece off to the side, the community and key stakeholders. We'll talk a little bit about some of the community engagement that we've done to date, and then some planned future community engagement so that we can get more feedback from all of you moving forward. Design Workshop is the prime consultant, but we have some incredible partners, some of which are here today. Todd Johnson with Utah State. He's our urban design advisor, resident white hair kind of old guy, which is really helpful. You're welcome. Have to have one of those on the team. Wow Atelier. If Greg, you're here, maybe you can, there's Greg. So Greg runs a really great architecture firm in Salt Lake and provides some really great guidance. As we start to talk about design standards and guidelines, Greg's firm has been integral to that. And I already pointed out Mike and Jennifer, but with Afton Klein Group, they've recently joined the team and really provided that great branding experience and identity experience as we move forward. So thank you to them. So where are we in the process? The mayor pointed out that we really started this project almost a year ago. If you attended the summit in Denver, would you mind raising your hand? So a fair amount of people in this room traveled to Denver. We brought everybody to Denver because there's a couple of analog projects in Denver that we wanted to show the folks on our steering committee, kind of the behind the scenes of how all of that happened. We also brought in folks from Boise, Idaho. We brought in folks from Raleigh, Durham, and from Austin to tell those stories of how they started their catalytic movement towards growth in each one of those cities. Throughout the summer and into the fall, we did a number of different community engagement events, culminating in a public workshop, the first public workshop. If anybody attend that in December, a few folks, great. In that one, we asked the community to give their preference on housing types, on open space networks, on parks and recreation, employment, those sorts of things. All that feedback went back into the plan. Shortly after that, we posted all of that information onto a survey, and we had some incredible responses. Did anybody go to the online survey? Wonderful, wonderful. And so that leads us to where we are today. And so we're going to show a little bit of the work that led up to today, and then we're going to really unveil kind of these concepts, these early concepts of the first couple of episodes of this planning process. So these are some images from that summit. So again, we had a large group gathered together for a couple of very intensive days where we toured a number of projects. We talked about the economics, we talked about the cultural and the historic elements that were so key in a lot of these developments. And then we broke up into small groups into each one of those project tenants, and we brainstormed how can we make Ogden a better place in each one of those tenants. Throughout the summer, we held a number of community engagement events, but also a number of these stakeholder group meetings. And the one on the bottom looks extremely boring, but I promise you that it was fun and engaging. But most of them are on their phone, but it's a lot of fun in those groups. We picked the perfect time to get outside in December, a very cold, probably 10-degree day, to tour the city. And this was really important. Our focus group, you'll see in our slides, our focus group is fairly focused on the downtown core, which has been directed by all of you and all of the folks that responded to the survey. However, we felt it really important to get to know all of the adjacent districts and the identity of those districts. And so we broke up into small groups. We went out and we canvassed the neighborhoods with a very kind of diverse group of folks. Some people had downtown, some people had the River District and the neighborhood to the south. And we highlighted what were the wonderful aspects of those areas. And so that we're inventorying all of the great things that already exist today. Because the last thing we want to do is propose new development or new plans where we have existing assets. The survey itself was open from December through February, It was in both English and Spanish, and we had a little over 1,000 respondents, which is a really good survey. And in that survey, we highlighted the assets, or we asked basically the questions on assets, challenges, and priorities. So the first question, I'm not going to walk you through all the questions, but I'm going to walk you through a couple of them, and I apologize, that's a little small, but the first question asks, what are downtown Ogden's greatest assets? So with this one, if you participated in the survey, you already know this. If you haven't, I'll walk you through it a little bit. You see a heat map there. So where the red is, that's the most intense area that people were selecting, and it starts to go green and then purple as there are less assets. If you look down here on the bottom, there's 1,673 individual assets that all of you selected as important things that we need to consider. Those things typically or each one of those pins had a little description and a reason why we needed to keep those critical. You see some of the bigger, more prominent ones, the church, the junction, Lindquist Field, the theater, municipal gardens, the library site, Union Station, all of those are pretty top of mind. But what was really great for us was to understand kind of that next layer down and where are some of the assets that we might not know about. The next question we ask are, what are the places you think improvements or are a challenge to the success of downtown Ogden? So you can start to see kind of how that heat map adjusts just slightly. So here's where we ask people to really identify where we needed to spend the money on the public side. So where can we improve street experience, especially for the pedestrians, where those vacancies and those empty lots are. And then it was highlighted that the Marshall White Center could be better utilized. There's 1,000 individual pins on this map as well. The next one was really about public investment priorities. So where should the city prioritize public investment dollars? This helps guide the future planning of this project and some of the plans that we're showing. And so we saw a lot of pins around the parks and open space ideas in downtown. A lot of comments in relationship to the mobility and the pedestrian and transit improvements in downtown. There were a lot of discussions about connecting to the Ogden River to the north. And there were some great comments about supporting community centers and gathering places. I think the last question we asked was, where should the city encourage private investment? Now this is really important. It was important to ask the community about where that private investment should go. And then that starts to inform how we episodically plan this out. So the comments here, the key takeaways: bring Ogden's great retail street back, which is 25th Street, which is Washington Avenue. We've heard so many great stories about the good old days on Washington Avenue where it was much more pedestrian focused and much less vehicular dominated. And then Wall Avenue and how that has become a bit of a barrier for pedestrians as well. We heard about expanding housing options in the downtown core and the fact that there really aren't a lot of great housing options in that core. New businesses in the downtown core, and redevelop those vacant sites. All of while we want to make sure we're preserving those historic structures. So back to that dilemma, and we do this on every project we undertake. We try to frame the problem that we're trying to solve. And so like Brandon said, there are a number of historical and natural assets that we have got to protect and amplify here in Ogden. But we really want to make this the nexus for business and employment attraction, residential growth, and recreational and cultural activity. How do we do that? So in our planning approach, we'll talk a little bit about an episodic planning approach. Those are all guided by the smart growth potential. So today, when we're planning new communities and downtowns, people are demanding these walkable, mixed-use, diverse communities, and that's where the majority of the investment dollars are going. So we've got to increase walkability. How we increase walkability is by providing a multitude of mobility options. So it's not just great sidewalks, but it's it's bike lanes, it's transit access. It's all of those working in concert. We've got to increase job density. When you increase job density, what comes with that is also needs, social needs. So we've got to provide opportunities for childcare and other things that support that job density. We've got to increase housing density in the downtown core. We have to be careful about how we increase housing density. We want to make sure that we provide a diversity of housing. So we provide renting and owning opportunities in downtown. And that leads to the people in places, and we don't want to displace. We want to make sure that it's an affordable and attractive place for everyone to live. It's proven that when you do this, and you increase walkability, and you increase investment in your downtown core, you can save up to almost 40% on your infrastructure costs. The reason you do that is because it's all clustered development in a very dense area. We also have seen 10% savings on public services and 10 times revenue generation. The idea here is that we're raising all ships. So let's talk a little bit about this idea of episodic planning. It sounds like a big term, but it's really pretty simple. We have the opportunity and the need to raise the value of the property in downtown, specifically the vacant or the tax-exempt property. The graph onto the left-hand side shows a pretty typical growth in any typical municipality. So you've got population growth, time and land value increasing at a regular rate. What we're hoping to do is actually create catalytic development moments or episodes that really increase the value of that property in each one of these episodes. So if you see on the bottom there in episode 1, the concept there is to support the downtown. So public investment increases that, or it provides a catalytic movement that then increases value within that 2020 to 2025 timeframe. The next episode builds off of that momentum and it goes up incrementally. The concept here is that we're not trying to develop all the land all at once, but we're actually trying to raise the value at each one of these episodes. So what does that mean? This diagram right here shows all of the tax-exempt lands within that focus area, which was defined by the surveys. So if you squint your eyes, you're looking at maybe 35 to 40% of that property in the downtown area that's tax-exempt today. So this is non-contributing or low-contributing property as it stands today. This is the dilemma. We've got to increase the value of this property to be able to pay for the services, to be able to pay for the open space and the parks and the streets and all the wonderful things that the city can provide. If we drill down a little bit more and we look at the finer grain detail, we look at which parcels there do the city actually own? And you can start to see those in yellow. We then overlay the county-owned parcels, and we start to build this network we start to break down the blue and get into the detail. There's a portion of RDA-owned property in here, and if you're familiar with this plan, I don't have a pointer, unfortunately. Can you see that? This is the junction area right here, and the thing to consider with the junction is that TIF is actually paid off in about 7 years. So at that point, that land is then contributing back to the general fund. So that is a short-term issue. Some of these other ones are much longer-term issues. The UTA portion there, next to the UP portion, that is the UP. Let me go back and forth on that. That's a huge chunk of property there, about 175 acres. The future, potentially, of where we could go here. So again, if we think about how we take that dilemma and we take that opportunity, which is this diagram, this is all about opportunity, and we solve for that, we start to think about how do you start developing those in incremental episodes. So the first thing I want to show you here is what we're positing is episode 1. So this is the first of the development episodes. With this, we want to build on the strength of the historic 25th Street. So we want to build on the assets that we already have. There's so many wonderful assets here that we want to take advantage of those.
I'm sorry to interrupt. Do you want to just point out where the station is?
Yeah. Yeah, I'm sorry. So this is Union Station right here. So this is the Municipal Gardens right here. And we are down this way. So here's Grant Avenue. Grant is complete to about 24th Street. We need to consider extending that Grant Street promenade. We need to look at opportunities along 26th Street, Kiesel Ave, all of these wonderful public investments that can encourage private development. We also have this opportunity, let me go back a second. There's a number of large infill lots, and you saw those on that map that showed city-owned property. That's where we're starting to focus some of these initial Episode 1 catalytic developments. So here are some of those public improvements. So let's just walk through this really quick. On the north side, the BRT line comes down 25th, turns on Washington Ave, and then comes west here all the way to the transit center over there. We've highlighted a number of locations for potential future parking. We understand that development in some of these areas is going to cause a displacement in surface parking lots. But that density is required to, again, raise the value of that property. So we are proposing that there are a handful, or probably 2 parking lots in this first initial episode. We also want to break down the structure of the really long blocks here in Ogden. And so we want to introduce this series of mid-block crossings, similar to what already exists on 25th. When we look at what the major developments that we're suggesting in Episode 1 potentially could be, we look at the Wonder Block site, which is this piece right here. We look at potential residential, which is in the Electric Alley area here. We look at a new employment center just off a wall on the north side. We look at some county improvements, potential convention center development. And so when we start to add all of those up, what does that mean? And how does that get us towards our goal of creating a more complete and contributing community? In this episode, we're suggesting that we can bring close to 900 units of residential. And again, that residential would want to come in a variety of different types. So we want to provide both rental and ownership in that residential. We're suggesting that with the potential office space and employment areas that we're highlighting here in the kind of bluish color, that could support close to 1,700 jobs. That's really important because as corporations and communities are looking at Ogden or the Wasatch Front to really move from California and other locations, they're looking at what is the potential, where is the capacity. And so to show a capacity of 1,700 potential jobs is a really attractive thing. But you have to have all of these components. You have to have the housing. We're looking at potentially adding additional hotel rooms to the tune of about 300 rooms. Additional retail, and that retail comes in the form of infill along 25th, so it bolsters the quality of 25th. We're looking at civic and cultural improvements, which again include that convention center expansion piece on the county-owned property. And then really the parking, like I lightly touched on before, because we have to displace some of this surface parking that exists today, we have to replace that. And we also have to support these new uses with parking. And so we're proposing these 2 parking structures, which supply an additional 1,600 spaces. The next episode, so this first episode moves the needle. It raises all the ships. It raises collective land value. So that when we get to this second episode, and Episode 3 and Episode 4, the value has increased. And so this one is city-led but privately supported. So we look at things like the 24th Street Viaduct and finding a way to drop that viaduct so that it's at grade at wall, which completely unlocks an additional development to the north. We look at improvements on Wall Avenue that are pedestrian-based, slow traffic, and make it much more friendly to cross into the Union Station development area. And we actually do a Union Station campus master plan and development. With that comes new cultural facilities to the south and a whole new public amenity and open space plan in the front of Union Station. So those are all highlighted here. The next, on the private side, we look at the development of the UTA parcel. This was that blue parcel in the map previously. So we're looking for workforce residential in that area. We look at infill of vacant and underutilized parcels on 24th Street and on Wall. So these are those missing teeth that exist out there today. And how do we fill in some of those parcels? And then we continue the momentum that's already occurring on 26th and continue the development that's happening, that has already happened at Wonder Block site, and look for potential opportunities across the street and along 26th to try to increase density in that way. So what does all that mean? We've got a new employment center on the north side in the UTA parcel. And we've got workforce housing up there to the tune of, well, ultimately all of the residential totals about another 1,100 units. Again, mixed units so that we can provide a cross-section of residential. We've brought 1,700 jobs. We have about 120,000 square feet of retail, which is likely at the base of a lot of these buildings. And then again, there are improvements and additions to the Union Station master plan area to the tune of about 120,000 square feet. So those are the things that we want to talk about in more detail. We want to get your feedback on. We have people out, we will have people out in the lobby out here to get into the weeds on some of these discussions. But as we move forward, we want to confirm these episode priorities. Are we headed in the right direction? And as we move from episode 2 to episode 3 and episode 4, which are our long-term plans, we'd love to get your feedback on how we move forward. We want to test all of these priorities that we hear and we talk about today against the smart growth and community equity goals, which are those walkability goals and historic assets. And ultimately, we want to help develop, and we talked about this a little bit at the last public meeting, these design standards and guidelines. The guidelines themselves, once applied to downtown, the core area, will ensure a higher quality of development as we move forward. That will raise all ships, it raises value, but it also gives additional developers the confidence that the vacant parcel next to them will be developed to a minimum level of standard, which is a high quality standard. So with that, thank you very much. Anybody that's, again, as Brandon pointed out, anybody that's wearing one of these t-shirts or has any of this swag on is available to answer any questions you have. We have a number of different stations out there with boards and maps and would love to get into more detail. So thank you very much.